Hi, this is Chris Young. Welcome to episode 86 of Contemplating Life, Oscar edition. As previously reported, I'm not going to have time to review all 9 of the 10 Best Picture nominated films I've seen this year in the detail that I usually do. So we're going to give you a brief summary of the films I've seen, what I liked or didn't like, and what I think may or may not win. Also, the YouTube version of this episode is not going to have the kinds of video clips or even still pictures that I normally have when I do movie or TV reviews. I'm recording this on Saturday, March 1st. The Oscars are tomorrow night. I'm going to be lucky to get this thing done before then. As reported last time, Wicked is one of my favorites of the year. But there's one other fascinating musical up for consideration. That's the Netflix film, Amelia Perez. It's the story of a vicious cartel boss who is transgender and wants to become a woman. Perez hires a lawyer, played by Zoe Saldana, to recruit a surgeon to perform the operation. Perez then fakes her own death to start over her life as a woman. She makes provisions for her wife and children to escape to Switzerland, where they're given access to a hefty Swiss bank account. She has no idea her husband faked his death. Selena Gomez plays the wife. Now, the majority of the film is in Spanish with English subtitles. And while I usually don't mind reading subtitles in a foreign language film, I found it particularly troubling during the song and dance numbers, because I was too busy reading the subtitles to really enjoy the performances. After the surgery, the story jumps 4 years, and Amelia tracks down her former lawyer. This terrifies the lawyer, thinking she's going to be killed because she's one of only a couple of people who know the secret. On the contrary, Amelia wants to hire her again to help her reunite with her wife and kids. She plans to claim to be a cousin of the deceased husband. Along the way, Amelia is moved by the story of a woman who has a missing relative. Hundreds of people go missing in Mexico each year, either kidnapped or killed by the drug cartels. So she forms a charity to help track down the fate of these missing people and bring closure to the families. After all, many of the missing were at her own people's hands. Much of the information comes from interviewing people in jail who literally know where the bodies are buried. The performances are top-notch all around. You genuinely feel Amelia's anguish in her quest to live her true life as a woman, and somehow make up for all the evil she created as a vicious cartel boss. As you might suspect, because she's continuing to live a lie, the truth has its way of catching up with her, and she cannot escape her violent past. Although you might find it difficult to watch such a film with subtitles, it's certainly worth its nominations, and I can recommend it. The film has been nominated for 13 Oscars. That's the most ever for a non-English language film. Nominations include Best Picture, Best International Feature Film, Best Makeup and Hairstyling, Best Sound, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Cinematography, and Best Film Editing. Director Jacques Audiard is also nominated. Carla Sofia Gascon is a controversial nominee for Best Lead Actress because she is the first transsexual to be nominated in any category other than their gender assigned at birth. And as if that weren't controversial enough, racist anti-Semitic social posts that Gascon has made in the past have resurfaced. The pundits seem to think that this controversy will hurt not only her chances, but perhaps the chances of the entire film. That seems unfair. Controversies aside, I thought it was an outstanding performance that truly made me feel her plight. Zoe Saldana is also nominated for supporting actress as the lawyer. While it's a fantastic performance, and probably deserving of the nomination, I was more impressed by Selena Gomez, who played the wife. My only previous familiarity with Gomez's work is in the show Only Murders in the Building, alongside Steve Martin and Martin Short. In that series, she plays a rather timid, laid-back character, and in my opinion, it doesn't really allow her to show off her acting skills compared to what she's called to do in this role. I was very much impressed by her performance. In addition to a nomination for the overall musical score, two of the songs are nominated for Best Original Song. El Mal, which is my favorite of the film, and Mia Camino. Typically having two nominations in the same category for the same film is a problem because it splits the fans' votes. But I wouldn't be surprised if one of these songs wins. IMDb lists 106 wins and an additional 245 nominations. But remember that they list dozens of awards that you never heard of. The film has earned only a little over $15 million on an estimated budget of 25 million euros. However, it's on Netflix, and box office numbers don't mean much for films released directly to streaming. It's currently still available on Netflix. I think it's a good contender to win some awards, if it can avoid the controversy. Moving along, there are two other films with strong female protagonists that unfortunately I cannot recommend. I don't find either of them to be worthy of their nominations for Best Picture, nor their nominations for lead actress. The first of these is The Substance, which stars Demi Moore as an aging actress. Although she's still quite attractive and has an exceptionally fit body for a woman her age, she no longer measures up to the ideals expected by Hollywood. She's the host of an exercise program on TV, but she's fired by the network, which wants a younger woman. Soon after firing, she's contacted by some mysterious company offering her the substance. This is a drug which, when injected, creates a younger clone of yourself. She reluctantly agrees to take the substance, without much forethought or a detailed explanation of the consequences of the decision. In a pivotal scene, she stands naked in her bathroom and injects the first dose, which will create the clone. She falls to the ground and begins writhing in agony until her spine splits open. Then a fully formed, adult, beautiful 27-year-old woman crawls out of her body, defying every law of physics that you can think of. How do you magically double the mass of a human being by simply injecting a chemical? We're clearly in the realm of fantasy and not science fiction. The gimmick is that these two versions of the woman, the younger and the older one, must share a life. One of them will be conscious for 7 days, while the other lies in a coma. After 7 days, there's another injection, and they swap positions, with the older one taking over and the younger one unconscious. To survive these 7 days, you have to extract fluid from the unconscious version using a syringe and inject it into yourself. Now, the young clone is given the older actress's former job and becomes a big overnight sensation. She enjoys fame and fortune so much that she gets greedy and tries to extend her 7 days of consciousness. This drastically affects the older version, causing her to age rapidly. The entire thing deteriorates when she attempts to clone herself yet again, turning into a hideous monster reminiscent of the creature in John Carpenter's classic sci-fi horror film, The Thing. And John Carpenter isn't the only director that this film references. We can easily see director Coralie Farragut attempting to emulate the styles of Stanley Kubrick, David Cronenberg, and Brian De Palma, just to name a few. I never got the sense that she had a style of her own. Her nomination for Best Director is not deserved, nor is her nomination for Best Original Screenplay. It was nominated for a Golden Globe in the comedy category. And indeed, I found myself laughing, but not because it was funny, simply because it was so ridiculous. It tries to take a serious topic like our cultural obsession with youth and beauty, and it makes a mockery of itself. In no way do I believe it deserves Best Picture nomination. Demi Moore won the Golden Globe Award for Best Actress in a Comedy or Musical, and is nominated for Best Actress Oscar, none of which are deserved. I think she must have gotten some sort of sympathy vote for daring to be naked on camera at her age. At best, this is a mildly entertaining, cheesy horror movie. You might find it a guilty pleasure when it comes to your favorite streaming service, but this is not Oscar material. It's nominated for hair and makeup, and it won the BAFTA and Critics' Choice Awards in that category. I suppose the creature makeup was nomination worthy. Margaret Qualley received a Golden Globe Supporting Actress nomination, as well as other award nominations in her role as the younger version of our protagonist. And I slightly enjoyed her performance more than that of Demi Moore. But Margaret Qualley did not receive an Oscar nomination. IMDb lists 128 wins and an additional 247 nominations. Although it only earned $17 million in the U.S. and Canada, it's earned $77 million worldwide on an estimated budget of $17.5 million. It's currently available as a digital purchase from Amazon and other sources. The other undeserved nomination, with a strong female lead character, is Anora. This is the story of a woman who is an exotic dancer and a prostitute, who lives in Brooklyn in the present day. Her boss at the strip club asks her to take on a special client named Ivan. He's the young, wealthy son of a Russian oligarch. Anora, who prefers to be called Annie, speaks Russian because her grandmother was Russian. After giving the client a lap dance, he asks if she ever offers private parties, and she gives him her contact information. She goes to his mansion, which has a picturesque overview of the Hudson River, and she has sex with him. Then he invites her to a party on New Year's Eve, and she and her girlfriend go, having a raucous time, partying and doing drugs. She spends the night with Ivan, and then he asks her to be his pretend girlfriend for an entire week. He offers her $10,000, and she asks for $15,000, and he agrees. Near the end of the week, they fly off to Vegas with a bunch of his friends to party some more. And on their last night together, he proposes marriage. At first she assumes he's joking, but he seems serious, and eventually she agrees. They get married in a Vegas chapel, and then return to New York for more sex and partying. Now, the first 45 minutes of the film are nothing but them partying, drinking, smoking drugs, and having sex. We get very little character development and zero plot. Eventually, the young playboy's Russian parents find out about the marriage and send 3 Armenian gangsters to the mansion to force them to get the marriage annulled. Ivan flees the mansion, leaving Annie to deal with the gangsters. They tried to tie her up to keep her from fleeing, but along the way she kicks one of them in the face, breaking his nose. They try to impress on her that Ivan doesn't really love her, and they offer her $10,000 to agree to the annulment and go away. Her only alternative is that the powerful Russian parents will make her life a living hell and the life of everyone she loves. Throughout the rest of the film, they go around New York trying to track down Ivan, while she insists that he really loves her. In the end, of course, he doesn't, and she begins to realize that. They fly back to Vegas to get the annulment, accompanied by the Russian parents and the Armenian gangsters. Along the way, we begin to see that one of the gangsters, Igor, begins to feel sorry for her. The only marginally interesting scene in the entire film is after the annulment. Ivan's mother screams at Annie, "You're nothing but a whore." To which Annie replies, "Yeah, well, your son hates you so much that he married me just to spite you." At that point, Ivan's father, who hasn't had a word to say the entire time, begins laughing hysterically. I loved it. Like The Substance, this is at best a mildly entertaining B movie that no way deserves any of its nominations. It was awarded the prestigious Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. And this reminds me of the Palme d'Or winner 2 years ago, Triangle of Sadness, which highlighted the arrogance of the ultra-rich and condescending attitude towards lower-class people. I find this ironic or perhaps hypocritical, because the attendees at the Cannes Film Festival represent the rich upper crust of society. I think they believe that it's redeeming to give awards that criticize the very arrogance of the typical festival attendees. In addition to the undeserved Best Picture, Sean Baker is nominated for directing, original screenplay, and film editing. Mikey Madison was nominated as Best Actress for the title role. And one of the gangsters, Igor, who befriends her, is played by Yura Borisov, and he has a supporting actor nomination for what I thought was a mildly interesting performance. Still, I don't think any of the nominations are justified. IMDb reports 131 wins, with an additional 272 nominations. The film's earned just $15 million in the U.S. and Canada, and $38 million worldwide on an estimated budget of just $6 million. Again, it's a mildly amusing B movie that I could recommend when it comes to streaming. It's currently available for purchase as a digital download on Amazon and other platforms. Every year, there are a couple of films that when you see the trailer, you can already imagine there's going to be a version of that trailer that adds the words, "For your consideration." At first glance, these films are aiming for award nominations, and typically they're worthy of them. In varying degrees, we have 3 of these films this year, and the first is probably the odds-on favorite to win Best Picture and Best Actor. We're talking about the 3.5-hour epic film, The Brutalist. Adrian Brody stars as Laszlo Toth, a Jewish architect from Hungary who immigrates to the U.S. to escape the Nazis. He's forced to leave behind his wife, an adult niece. He travels to Philadelphia, where he rooms in the storage closet of a furniture store owned by his cousin. They're approached by a rich young man, Harry Lee Van Buren Jr., who wants them to decorate his father's office with redesign and custom furniture. The rich father is unaware of his son's plans, and when he returns to home to see the work partially completed, he throws a fit, especially because they've hired Negro workers to do the job. He fires everyone and refuses to pay for any of it. The cousin blames Laszlo for no reason and throws him out. Well, eventually, the wealthy father, Harrison Lee Van Buren Sr., played by Guy Pearce, realizes that the office remodeling is a masterpiece of design, and it gets featured in a photo spread in Look magazine. He tracks down Laszlo and commissions him to design a large community center on the top of a hill on his estate. The center will contain meeting rooms, a library, a gymnasium with a pool, and a Christian chapel. Van Buren also assists him in getting his wife and niece out of Europe to join him in the U.S. Laszlo turns out to be a very arrogant person who insists that no changes be made in his design. At one point, he even agrees to forego much or all of his fees to preserve an expensive aspect of the design. It was that point I became confused about the title of the film. Was the rich benefactor the brutal one, or was it the architect? I also wondered if this was based on a true story. A quick Google search revealed that it is not. The title comes from an architecture style known as brutalist style. It's a postmodern style of architecture, known for bland concrete walls and rather uninteresting cubic structures. I won't bother telling you the rest of the plot, except to say that after an accident, the project is canceled and everyone is fired. Then later they attempt to resurrect the project, and this leads to a bizarre and violent encounter between the benefactor and the architect. The project gets canceled again, and then we jump to an epilogue decades later, when Laszlo is being celebrated for his lifetime of work. Now there's some sort of explanation given by his niece about why he's so insistent on the design of the community center, but I really couldn't follow it. The niece spoke with such a thick Hungarian accent that I couldn't understand it. Although I hate to admit it, the only version of the film I could obtain was a bootleg camera copy, and naturally there were no closed captions available, and even the open captions of the Hungarian dialogue was poor contrast and difficult to read. Now, because I respect copyright, I will be purchasing a copy of the film once it's available. Speaking of the Hungarian accents, this film is controversial because the producers revealed that AI enhanced some of Brody and Jones's Hungarian dialogue to make it more accurate. I'm not opposed to the use of AI for this purpose, but I really think it's entirely unnecessary. How much of the audience is going to know or care if the Hungarian pronunciation is perfect? Well, I suppose there are some. There are people who are complaining that the accents in Amelia Perez were not accurate, that they weren't Mexican enough. They were from some other Hispanic territory. The Brutalists received 10 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, Cinematography, Original Score, Film Editing, and Production Design. Brady Corbett is nominated for director and is co-author of the original screenplay. Adrian Brody is an odds-on favorite to win Best Actor. He already won the Golden Globe. And Felicity Jones does an admirable job as Laszlo's wife, Elizabeth. We should mention that when she arrives from Europe, she is in a wheelchair because she is ill from malnutrition. Now, she is a very strong woman who had been a journalist in Europe. And with some assistance from their benefactor, she is able to continue her journalism career in America. In a climactic moment in the film, she finds the strength to stand up from her wheelchair and deliver a scathing indictment of Van Buren. Suddenly, when she needs to stand up to the millionaire, she's able to literally do so despite her disability. I found this to be a cringe-worthy gimmick. Despite my issues with this plot point, she does deserve her supporting actress nomination. And Guy Pearce also creates a memorable character as Van Buren Sr. and deserves his supporting actor nomination. IMDb lists 124 wins and an additional 344 nominations, and I will not be surprised if it takes home multiple statues on Oscar night. The film grossed $15 million in the U.S. and Canada and $36.6 million worldwide on an estimated budget of $10 million. Now, I couldn't judge the cinematography very well because it was such a poorly captured copy. It was filmed in VistaVision, which is a 35mm film format in which the film travels through the camera and projector horizontally rather than vertically, giving a larger image. This is similar to how IMAX film uses the same gimmick on 70mm film. The filmmakers said they wanted to use this older format because it was introduced around the same time as the events of the film. The film itself probably deserves its nomination just for the audacity of telling such an epic story over 3.5 hours. But personally, I didn't think it was worth my time. I will pay for it out of a sense of honor, but I would have not felt it was worth it to go to a theater and spend 3 hours 45 minutes with a 15-minute intermission in the middle to see the film. Moving along, another of the films whose trailer implies for your consideration is Conclave. It's a fictional story of a Vatican conclave that gathers to elect a new pope in the modern day. It stars Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, and Isabella Rossellini. Everything about this film makes it worthy of all its nominations, except perhaps for the supporting actress nomination for Rossellini, who's only in the film for a couple of minutes. She really doesn't contribute much. The story of the political infighting surrounding the election of a new pope will keep you on the edge of your seat, guessing what new scandal will pop up next and eliminate various candidates. Now, I had a pretty good idea who I thought was going to end up winning the election, and I was wrong. There's some interesting symbolism in the film. At one point, there's a terrorist attack outside the Vatican, which causes the windows of the Sistine Chapel to blow out. And that's a turning point in the movie. This is an obvious reference to a statement by Pope John the 23rd, who is reported to have said that he called the Second Vatican Council in order to, quote, throw open the windows and let the Holy Spirit enter, end quote. By the way, there is some controversy over whether Pope John actually said that. But point aside, that's what it's referring to. Overall, the acting, cinematography, plot, direction, everything about the story is top notch until we get to the end. There's a plot twist at the end that I don't think you could have remotely anticipated. I'll have more to say about that plot twist in the epilogue at the end of the podcast that will spoil everything. All I can say at this point that I felt like it ruined an otherwise excellent film. I can still recommend it, and your opinion of the ending might vary from mine. You may have liked it more than I did. There's a link in the description to a YouTube video about some very subtle special effects in the film that I think you'll find interesting. It doesn't look like a film with special effects, but there are lots of them. In addition to the Best Picture nomination, it was also nominated for Original Score, Adapted Screenplay, Film Editing, Production Design, and Costume Design. Ralph Fiennes deserves his lead actor nomination, and as mentioned earlier, I'm not so sure Isabella Rossellini did anything special to deserve her supporting actress nomination. IMDb lists 82 wins and an additional 312 nominations. It's earned $32 million in the U.S. and Canada, $98 million worldwide, on an estimated budget of $20 million. It's currently available for streaming on Peacock TV. Again, I'll have more to say about the film at the end of the podcast in the spoiler section. Our next film is Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2. I'm completely unable to be objective about this. I was a huge fan of Frank Herbert's original novel when I read it back in my college days. I didn't hate David Lynch's 1984 adaptation of the work as much as I probably should have. And there was also a Sci-Fi Channel adaptation that I thought was adequate, but a bit boring. However, together, Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2 are the adaptations of Dune that fans and I have been waiting for decades. It's an amazing piece of filmmaking that shows great respect to the original work. The changes that Villeneuve makes from the original novel are mostly positive. Paul Atreides' girlfriend, Chani, is played by Zendaya, and she's a much more interesting character in the film than she is in the novel. In the screenplay, co-authored by Villeneuve, they do a great job, in part through that reimagining of Chani, in explaining that Paul really is not a hero. He's a dangerous and vengeful person with a messiah complex who's going to lead the Empire into a deadly war for his own selfish personal reasons. Now, Dune was always supposed to be a cautionary tale about messiah figures, but many readers didn't seem to get that from the story. So in this adaptation, the message is much clearer. There was one plot change that did bother me. It's the timeline of Paul's time in the desert, which is compressed. When Paul and his mother fled into the desert, she's pregnant with Paul's sister. And in the original novel and other adaptation, Paul spends several years leading the Fremen in a rebellion against the House Harkonnen, who overthrew his father. In the book, by the climax of the story, Paul's sister is about 4 years old. Yet in the film, she's not yet born at the end of the film adaptation. This means that everything that Paul did to rally the Fremen in rebellion, and Paul's awakening as a Messiah, is all compressed into less than 9 months. That just didn't make sense to me. But except for that change, everything else was either highly true to the original story, or the changes made good sense to me. It much deserves its 5 Oscar nominations for Best Picture, Visual Effects, Cinematography, Production Design, and Sound. Although it received no acting or directing nominations, I think the entire thing is top-notch, especially the performances by Timothée Chalamet as Paul Atreides and Zendaya as Chani. Alright, time out for a quick joke. Austin Butler, who's most known for playing Elvis in the 2022 biopic, plays Fayed Rathua Harkonnen. Now there's a climactic fight scene between him and Paul near the end of the film. When Paul kills him, I leaned over to my friend Rich and said, "Elvis has left the building." By the way, there's another rock star connection to that character. Fayed was played by jazz rock superstar Sting in the 1984 David Lynch adaptation of the story. I think I liked Sting's portrayal better. I would call Dune Part 2 a close tie with Wicked for my favorite nominated film this year, but I don't think either it or Wicked have a chance at Best Picture. The film has earned $714 million on an estimated budget of $190 million. It's currently available for streaming on Netflix and Max. Speaking of Timothée Chalamet, he's turned in quality performances this year in the lead roles of 2 Best Picture nominees. Although not nominated for Dune, he is nominated as the Best Actor in our next film. A Complete Unknown is a phenomenal biopic covering the early career of legendary songwriter Bob Dylan. The film opens with 19-year-old Dylan arriving in New York with little or no money and an acoustic guitar. He's on a pilgrimage to visit his folk-singing hero, Woody Guthrie, who's hospitalized and struggling with the severe effects of Huntington's disease. While visiting Guthrie, Dylan meets folk-singing icon Pete Seeger, brilliantly played by Edward Norton. Norton's nomination for Best Supporting Actor is very much deserved. In fact, I think this may be my favorite performance by anyone this year. As Seeger begins to discover what a musical genius Dylan is, the expression on his face is pure joy and a sight to behold. He doesn't have to say anything. His body language and facial expressions speak volumes. There are also similar moments where Dakota Fanning gives a tremendous performance as Dylan's girlfriend, Sylvie Russo. Again, it's not so much what she says, but it's her facial expressions that she delivers while listening to Dylan perform. And in both the case of Norton and Fanning, director James Mangold lets the camera linger on a close-up of their face so you can really soak in the emotion that they're feeling. Unfortunately, Fanning did not receive a supporting actress nomination. That honor went to Monica Barbaro for her portrayal of folk singer Joan Baez. Now, she gives a wonderful performance also, but if I had been nominating the film, I might have given it to Fanning instead. They both really deserve the nomination, but as I mentioned before, you can't nominate 2 actors for the same award in the same film. Neither one of them will win because the fans will split their votes. Timothée Chalamet gives an astonishing performance, singing more than a dozen musical numbers himself. He channels Bob Dylan completely. It's a phenomenal accomplishment. The film covers the beginning of his career up through an iconic performance at the Newport Folk Music Festival, in which he shocked the audience and alienated much of the folk music community by performing on electric guitar with a full rock band behind him. The audience failed to realize that in this new era of his career, his songs contained lyrics that were every bit as powerful as anything he'd written before, and were completely in tune with the social justice themes of the folk music movement. He was seen as betraying folk music principles, yet he was simply taking their message to a new level that would reach an even larger audience than the small folk music niche. Like several of the films that we discussed last year, this one explores the personal cost that must be paid by those who are friends or family of someone who is driven by genius. Overall, I'll call this my third favorite nominated film. Now, sadly, it was only available on a bootleg camera copy. Although the video quality was above average for such a download, the audio suffered terribly. Fortunately, it's now available as of today, March 1st, as a digital download, and I'll be purchasing a clean, legitimate copy so I can fully enjoy the film. I highly recommend this one. I don't know if it has much of a chance to win awards, but I'll be really pleased if it does. The 8 Oscar nominations include Best Picture, Best Sound, Adapted Screenplay, Costume Design. Also, director James Mangold is nominated. Timothée Chalamet is nominated for Best Actor, and he's the only person that might give Adrien Brody any competition. As I said before, I loved Edward Norton's performance. He really deserves his supporting actor nomination, as does Monica Barbaro for her supporting actress nomination as Joan Baez. IMDb lists 23 wins and an additional 127 nominations. The film has earned $110 million worldwide on an estimated budget of $70 million. And as I just mentioned, it's now available for purchase as a digital download. No word on when it will be available on streaming or cable. I was not able to see the nominated film I'm Still Here, which, like Amelia Perez, is nominated both for Best Picture and Best International Film. It's the first time that there's been 2 such double nominations in the same year. I was able to get a copy of the nominated film Nickel Boys, but I just couldn't watch it. The film's shot in a strange point-of-view camera using its 2 main characters. You're looking out through their eyes, and occasionally you see the character reflected in a window. It switches POV about every 8 or 10 minutes, and I found this cinematography trick so annoying I just couldn't get through it. It's based on the 2020 Pulitzer Prize-winning novel by Colin Whitehead. It tells the story of a pair of boys who are sent to the historic Dozier Reform School in Florida. That school operated for over 100 years and was eventually closed because it brutally abused the boys. Now, I could easily presume this is a poignant and compelling story. I might go back and try to give it a second chance, but it's going to be difficult to watch because of this bizarre cinematography style. In addition to its Best Picture nomination, it's also nominated for Adapted Screenplay. IMDb lists 50 wins and an additional 189 nominations. It's earned only $2.8 million worldwide with an estimated budget of $20 million. Now this year, all of the Best Actress nominees were in films nominated for Best Picture, so we've covered those. Under Best Actor, Coleman Domingo received a nomination for the film Sing Sing. Based on the quality of his work in nominated films last year, I presume he's turned in another great performance. I have access to the film, but I've not yet had time to watch it. Now we have to talk briefly about The Apprentice. It stars Sebastian Stan as a young Donald Trump who's learning to be a ruthless businessman from the iconic corrupt lawyer Roy Cohen. Now I can't say how accurate the film is, but if it is accurate, it clearly explains that everything you know about the kind of man that Donald Trump is today, he received studying under Cohen. In this case, Trump is the apprentice. Sebastian Stan much deserves his Best Actor nomination, as does Jeremy Strong for his Supporting Actor nomination for playing Roy Cohen. I highly recommend the film, which is currently available for a digital download purchase on Amazon and other platforms. No word yet on when it will come to streaming or cable. This small independent film has earned only $4 million in the US and Canada and $17 million worldwide, with an estimated budget of $15 million. By the way, both The Apprentice and Nickel Boys were shot in a nearly 4:3 aspect ratio, like an old analog TV, rather than a modern widescreen format. This continues a trend we saw last year in Maestro and The Holdovers, in which the cinematography tries to reflect the time period in which the story takes place. I was also able to see the film A Real Pain, in which Kieran Culkin received a Supporting Actor nomination. The film was written and directed by Jesse Eisenberg, who also stars in the film. Eisenberg and Culkin play a pair of mismatched cousins who reunite for a vacation tour of Poland to honor their late grandmother who survived the concentration camps during World War II. It's a poignant little buddy comedy with some quality performances. I doubt that Culkin will win, but he earned his nomination well. So there we have it. I briefly covered all of the Best Picture nominations that I was able to see, and all of the acting awards except for one. I'd hoped to cover the animated features, which include Pixar's Inside Out 2, The Wild Robot, and Flow, all of which I've heard good things about. Flow was also nominated in the foreign film category. I also had access to the two stop-motion animated films, Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul, and Memoir of a Snail, which also received feature animation nominations. By the way, Memoir of a Snail is the first R-rated film to receive a Best Animated Feature nomination. My prediction is it'll be a pretty big sweep for The Brutalist. The only competition might be Amelia Perez. Look for Wicked to win on production design, costume design, and there's also a shot it could beat Dune for visual effects. As mentioned before, Adrien Brody is a shoo-in for Best Actor. However, if the Academy wants to stick it to Donald Trump, they could give it to Sebastian Stan. The 97th Annual Academy Awards will be presented Sunday, March 2nd on ABC TV. I'm probably going to take a couple of weeks off from the podcast, and then I'll return either with some political rants or more autobiographical stories. One more comment. You know I always sign off with the words, "Fly safe, everyone." Now that salutation comes from an online outer space game that I play called EVE Online. And for me, it means have fun, but be careful. Now these days, unfortunately, it has a double meaning with all of the tragic air accidents that we've seen recently. But my intent remains the same. In these turbulent times, whatever we fear or whatever threatens us, remember to have fun, but be safe. If you want a spoiler-filled extra comment about Conclave, stay tuned after the closing. So as always, if you find this podcast educational, entertaining, enlightening, or even inspiring, consider sponsoring me on Patreon for just $5 a month. You get early access and other exclusive content. I'm not in this for the money, but every bit helps. And my deepest thanks to my financial supporters. There simply aren't words to tell you what that means. Even if you don't financially support me, please share links so I can grow my audience. All the back episodes are available, so check those out. Leave comments, questions, or other feedback. Tell me what you think about this year's movies. What did you or didn't you agree with what I had to say about them? I'll see you next time as we continue contemplating life. Until then, fly safe, everyone. Okay, here's the spoiler section about Conclave. Just as the cardinals are about to lock themselves in to the Vatican to deliberate on who will be the new pope, a new bishop arrives to claim that the previous pope had elevated him to cardinal just before his death. The cardinals accept his credentials, and he's permitted to participate in the voting. After multiple cardinals are faced with charges of misconduct, manipulation, and other scandals, this newly appointed cardinal stands up and makes an impassioned plea, chewing them out and telling them to cut the crap and the politics and just elect someone for God's sake. Although he's a complete unknown, pun intended, they rally around him and they elect him as the new pope. Now, if it ended there, I would have been happy. It was a clever plot twist I didn't see coming. I would have really enjoyed it. But after the election, it's discovered that the new pope is actually intersex. They have both male and female sexual characteristics. The pope claims that the previous pope knew about the condition and also supported his decision not to have surgery to make him definitively male. Of course, if the other cardinals had known this secret, they never would have elected him, and they might have even stripped him from his role as cardinal, bishop, or even priest. Now, I have some personal experience in attempting to write a story about an intersex character. I sought out the advice from a number of knowledgeable people about the condition, in addition to my own extensive online research. I wanted to make sure that I was handling the topic accurately and sensitively. Now, one of the people I contacted and tried to hire to advise me refused to take the job, saying that even my brief description of the story was, in their opinion, offensive to intersex people. They would not allow for the possibility that a straight cisgender male might be able to handle the topic appropriately. It bothered me that they would make this judgment without actually reading the story. Now, this advisor who turned down commenting on my story has a YouTube channel in which they discuss intersex issues, including a video on how to sensitively portray them in stories. I've linked that video in the description. And one of the things they said that you should not do is to make the intersex condition a surprise plot point. I think they were referring to exactly the kind of thing that occurred in Conclave. Now, in my story, I reveal my characters' genetic and gender issues up front within a few paragraphs of a 25,000 word story. It was not a surprise gotcha reveal like it was in Conclave. So I've linked that video where they talk about mistakes you can make in portraying intersex characters. I wrote a comment on that video about what you should and should not do with the intersex character, and I asked them if they would review the film Conclave. I looked through their channel and did not find such a review. I'm hoping they do provide a review, and my strong guess is they are not going to approve. That's all for now. Fly safe, everyone.